They called her the invisible daughter, the one no father acknowledged at dinner, the one no suitor saw at balls. Amabel lived in the shadows of her own home, watching her beautiful sister Clara collect admirers like trophies, while she collected books and silence. But when a widowed duke arrived with his imperious mother demanding he choose the prettiest sister, something unexpected happened. George saw what no one else had bothered to look for. And in a world where beauty was currency and obedience was law, his choice would become the scandal that changed everything. The fire in the library had died to embers hours ago, but Amabel had not moved. She sat in the worn leather chair her father never used, a book open in her lap, though she had stopped reading long before the light failed. The words no longer mattered. What mattered was that here, in this corner of the house, no one expected anything from her. No one looked for her. No one saw her at all. She heard the carriage before anyone announced it. The sound of wheels on gravel carried through the November air, sharp and final, like a declaration. Amabel closed her book and pressed it against her chest, listening to the commotion that followed. Doors opening, voices rising, her mother's high-pitched exclamations of delight. Clara had returned from London. Amabel did not rise. She knew what would happen next. The servants would rush to carry trunks. Her mother would fuss over Clara's complexion and her new gowns. Her father would emerge from his study, smiling in a way he never smiled for Amabel, and the house would fill with light and attention that had nothing to do with her. She was right. Within minutes, the entrance hall transformed into a stage. Clara stood at its center, radiant in a traveling dress of deep blue that made her eyes look like sapphires. She laughed at something their mother said, her voice musical and effortless. Even the housekeeper, Mrs. Brennan, who rarely showed emotion, beamed with pride. Amabel watched from the library doorway, half hidden in shadow. No one turned to look for her. No one said her name. You would think, after 23 years, the ache would have dulled. But it had not. Every time her family gathered and forgot she existed, the wound opened fresh. Clara finally noticed her. Their eyes met across the crowded hall, and for a moment, something flickered in Clara's expression. Guilt, perhaps, or pity. Then their mother pulled Clara toward the drawing room, chattering about invitations and gentlemen callers, and the moment passed. Amabel retreated to the library. She had learned to make herself small, to move through rooms without disturbing the air, to speak only when spoken to, which was rarely. Her mother had stopped trying to improve her years ago, declaring her too serious, too plain, too difficult. Her father barely remembered she lived in the house. And Clara, beautiful and sought-after Clara, existed in a different world entirely. The afternoon stretched into evening. Amabel remained in the library, listening to the sounds of celebration filtering through the walls. Dinner would be served soon. She would be expected to attend, to sit quietly at the table while Clara recounted stories of balls and theatres and titled gentlemen who had requested her company. Amabel would eat without tasting, nod without speaking, and then disappear back into the shadows where she belonged. She was arranging her skirts to rise when she heard footsteps in the hallway, male voices, low and urgent, her father and Mr. Pritchard, the family solicitor. Amabel froze. "You have how long?" the solicitor was saying. His voice carried the weight of bad news delivered too many times. 3 months, perhaps 4, if the creditors can be persuaded to wait. "But the estate is deeply encumbered, sir. Without a significant infusion of capital, you will lose everything." Her father made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. Amabel could not tell which. "There must be another way," her father said. "There is one way," Mr. Pritchard replied. "The same way I have advised for the past year. Your eldest daughter is beautiful and well-connected. If she were to marry well, to marry significantly well, the settlement could save you." The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush. Amabel pressed herself against the bookshelf, her heart pounding so hard she feared they would hear it. "The Duke of Ashworth is recently widowed," Mr. Pritchard continued. "He is looking to remarry. A man of his wealth and position could settle your debts with a stroke of his pen and never notice the expense." Amabel's breath caught. She knew the Duke of Ashworth by reputation only. A man in his 30s, reclusive since his wife's death 3 years prior, rumored to be cold and exacting. Her father's voice, when it came, sounded defeated. "And you believe he would consider Clara?" "I believe any man with eyes would consider Miss Clara Thornton," the solicitor said smoothly. "But you must act quickly. His mother, the Dowager Duchess, is determined to see him remarried before the year ends. She is hosting a ball next week. If you can secure an invitation, if Miss Thornton can make the right impression—" "Consider it done," her father interrupted, "whatever it takes." The footsteps moved away, fading into the depths of the house. Amabel remained motionless, her hands gripping the edge of the bookshelf so tightly her knuckles turned white. So that was it. The truth behind Clara's sudden return. The reason for her mother's excessive joy. Clara was not simply their beautiful daughter. She was their only asset. Their last desperate gamble against ruin. And Amabel? Amabel was nothing, not even valuable enough to be sold. She released the bookshelf and sank back into the chair. The library felt colder now, the shadows deeper. Outside, darkness had fallen completely. Through the window, she could see nothing but her own reflection, pale and indistinct, like a ghost haunting her own life. Somewhere in the house, Clara laughed again. The sound drifted through the walls, bright and oblivious. Clara, who had no idea she was being auctioned to the highest bidder. Clara, who would probably accept it with grace as she accepted everything. Amabel closed her eyes and tried to imagine what it would feel like to matter, to be seen, to be wanted for more than utility or ornament. But the imagination failed her. She had been invisible for so long that even her dreams had learned to overlook her. The dinner bell rang. Amabel rose, smoothed her plain grey dress and prepared to take her place at the table, to smile when expected, to nod when required, to be the daughter no one remembered was there. But as she left the library, the solicitor's words echoed in her mind. 3 months, perhaps 4. Time was running out. For her father, for Clara, for all of them. And Amabel, the forgotten daughter, could do nothing but watch as her family prepared to sacrifice her sister to save themselves. The question that haunted her as she walked toward the dining room was not whether Clara would accept her fate. It was what would become of Amabel when she did. The announcement came at breakfast. Amabel sat at her usual place, the chair closest to the window where the morning light never quite reached. She had learned to prefer the dimness. It made her easier to ignore. Her father stood at the head of the table, a letter in his hand. The paper was heavy, cream-colored, bearing a wax seal that even from a distance looked expensive. Clara sat across from Amabel, still glowing from last night's welcome, her breakfast barely touched. Their mother hovered near Clara's shoulder like a nervous bird. "We have received an invitation," her father began. His voice carried forced cheerfulness that made Amabel's stomach tighten. "The Duke of Ashworth requests the pleasure of our company at a ball to be held at Ashworth Manor 1 week hence." Clara's eyes widened. "A duke," she murmured. Their mother clasped her hands together. "Oh, this is wonderful. Clara, darling, this is exactly the opportunity we have been hoping for." "What opportunity?" Clara asked. Her voice held uncertainty that neither parent seemed to notice. Their father exchanged a glance with their mother, the kind of glance that spoke volumes in silence. Then he turned back to Clara, his expression serious. "My dear, you are 25, beautiful, accomplished, everything a gentleman of rank could desire. It is time you were settled. Well settled." The words hung in the air like a pronouncement. Amabel watched Clara's face carefully, saw the moment understanding dawned, the way her sister's shoulders stiffened almost imperceptibly. "You wish me to attract the Duke," Clara said quietly. "I wish you to secure your future," their father replied. "And in doing so, secure the future of this family." Amabel's fingers tightened around her teacup. So it was to be said aloud now. No more pretense. Clara was merchandise, and the ball was her auction. "There is one complication," their father continued. He glanced at the letter again, his jaw tightening. "The Duke's mother, the Dowager Duchess, has very specific expectations. She wishes her son to marry not just well, but visibly well. She wants, and I quote, the most beautiful bride society can offer." "Of course she does," their mother said quickly, "and Clara is exactly that. No one could dispute it." "The Dowager Duchess will be watching everything," their father said. Every introduction, every dance, every moment. She has made it clear that she will guide her son toward the appropriate choice. He paused, then added with careful emphasis, the prettiest choice. Amabel felt heat rise in her chest. Not anger exactly. Something closer to humiliation by proxy. Clara was being reduced to her face, her figure, her ability to ornament a man's arm, and their parents spoke of it as though it were an honor. Clara set down her fork with deliberate care. And what if the Duke does not agree with his mother's assessment? Her father's expression hardened. Then you will ensure that he does. The desperation in his voice was barely concealed now. Clara, you must understand. We have very little time. The estate, our home, everything depends on this match. How much time? Clara asked. Amabel wanted to speak, to tell Clara what she had overheard last night. 3 months, perhaps 4. But the words stuck in her throat. As always, she remained silent. Enough time to prepare you properly, their mother interjected, smoothly avoiding the question. We will need new gowns, of course, something that will make you shine like the jewel you are. And we must practice your conversation, your deportment. Everything must be perfect. Their father nodded. The Dowager Duchess expects perfection. She will not tolerate anything less. His gaze flickered briefly to Amabel, so quickly she almost missed it. In that glance she read everything. She would attend the ball, of course, appearances must be maintained, but she would be dressed to disappear, to serve as background scenery while Clara performed. Their mother was already planning aloud. We will visit the modiste this afternoon. Clara will need at least 3 new gowns, perhaps 4. Something in blue to match your eyes, darling. And we must do something elegant with your hair. She turned to Amabel as an afterthought. You will need something suitable as well, Amabel, something simple. Simple, Amabel repeated. The word tasted bitter. Yes, dear, simple and appropriate. Her mother's tone was distracted, already dismissing her. You understand? Amabel understood perfectly. She would be dressed to vanish, to ensure no attention strayed from Clara. The conversation moved on without her. Plans were made, strategies discussed. Clara said little, her expression growing more closed with each passing minute. But she did not protest. She never protested. Amabel excused herself before the meal ended. No one noticed her leave. She found herself back in the library, drawn to it like a refuge. But today the books offered no comfort. She stood at the window watching the grey sky, thinking about Clara, about duty and sacrifice and the 1,000 ways women were taught to erase themselves. The afternoon brought the promised trip to the modiste. Amabel accompanied them because it would have looked strange if she had not. She sat in the corner of the shop while her mother and the modiste fussed over Clara, draping her in silks and satins, debating between shades of blue that all looked identical to Amabel's untrained eye. When it came time for Amabel's dress, the process took less than 10 minutes. A bolt of pale grey fabric was selected. Simple lines, no embellishments. The modiste barely looked at her while taking measurements. You have lovely posture, miss, the woman said absently. It was the only compliment Amabel had received in months. The gown would be ready in 5 days. Clara's would be ready in 3. That evening, after dinner, Amabel found Clara standing on the terrace. Her sister was wrapped in a shawl staring out at the darkened gardens. For once they were alone. You do not have to do this, Amabel said quietly. Clara did not turn. Yes, I do. They could find another way. There is no other way. Clara's voice was flat, resigned. You heard, Father. We have very little time. So Amabel had been right. Clara understood the stakes. I wish, Clara began, then stopped. She turned to face Amabel, and in the moonlight, her beautiful face looked suddenly fragile. I wish I had been born plain. Is that terrible to say? The confession stunned Amabel into silence. Then perhaps someone would have loved me for something other than this. Clara gestured vaguely at herself. This face, this body, this carefully constructed performance of beauty. She laughed without humor. The Dowager Duchess wants the prettiest bride society can offer, as if I am a painting to be hung on a wall. You are more than that, Amabel said. Am I? Clara's eyes glistened. Or have I simply been trained so well that I have forgotten what else I might have been? Before Amabel could answer, their mother's voice called from inside. "Clara, darling, come in before you catch a chill." Clara squeezed Amabel's hand once quickly, then released it. "I am sorry," she whispered, "for all of it." She walked back inside, leaving Amabel alone on the terrace. Amabel stood there long after the house had gone quiet. She thought about her sister, trapped in beauty like a prison. She thought about the Duke, a man neither of them had met who was being pushed toward the prettiest option by a domineering mother. She thought about the ball, 1 week away, where Clara would be put on display like merchandise. And she thought about herself, the invisible daughter, the one no one would choose. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. The sound was lonely and wild and free. Amabel wrapped her arms around herself and wondered what freedom felt like. She had a feeling she was about to find out. Ashworth Manor blazed with light. Hundreds of candles filled the grand ballroom, their flames reflected in floor-to-ceiling mirrors that made the space seem infinite. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen starlight. The air smelled of beeswax, roses, and expensive perfume. Music floated through the rooms, elegant and precise. Amabel stood near the wall, trying to make herself part of the wallpaper. Her grey dress had turned out exactly as intended. Unremarkable. The modiste had done her work well. While Clara shimmered in sapphire silk that caught every eye in the room, Amabel faded into the background like fog. She watched her sister move through the crowd on their father's arm. Clara's face was composed, beautiful, perfect, but Amabel knew her sister well enough to see the tension in her shoulders, the slight hesitation before each smile. The Dowager Duchess stood near the entrance, a formidable woman in black silk and diamonds. Her sharp eyes tracked every guest, measuring, judging, dismissing. When Clara was presented, the Dowager's gaze swept over her with clinical precision, the way one might evaluate a horse at auction. "Acceptable," the Dowager said. Her tone suggested this was high praise. Amabel's mother beamed. Clara curtsied with perfect grace. "And this is your other daughter," the Dowager said, her eyes landing on Amabel with visible disinterest. "Yes, Your Grace. This is Amabel." Amabel curtsied. The Dowager's gaze moved past her before she had fully risen. Dismissed, forgotten, exactly as expected. "My son will join us shortly," the Dowager announced. "He is attending to correspondence, but he understands the purpose of this evening." The words carried weight. George, Duke of Ashworth, would choose tonight, and his mother had made her preference abundantly clear. The family moved deeper into the ballroom. Clara was immediately surrounded by admirers, young men and old who had heard of her beauty and wanted to confirm the rumors. She handled them with practiced ease, her laugh light and musical, her responses charming without being forward. Amabel drifted toward the edges of the room. She found a small alcove near a bookshelf, partially hidden by a marble column. From here she could observe without being observed. It was her preferred position at any social gathering. She noticed the books first. They were displayed rather than hidden, which suggested the Duke actually read them. Her fingers traced the spine of one volume. An essay on educational reform, progressive ideas, controversial in certain circles. She pulled it free and opened it, grateful for the distraction. The words drew her in immediately. The author argued for universal education, regardless of class or gender. Radical thinking, the kind that made her pulse quicken with recognition. Someone else who believed minds mattered more than birth. She was so absorbed that she did not hear him approach. That is one of my favorite essays. The voice was low, quiet, nothing like the booming tones she had expected from a duke. Amabel looked up, startled, and found herself face to face with a man who could only be George Ashworth. He was tall, with dark hair touched with grey at the temples. His face was handsome in a severe way, all sharp lines and careful control. But his eyes, grey like winter sky, held something unexpected, intelligence, and something that looked like loneliness. "I apologize," Amabel said quickly, closing the book. "I should not have—" "Please," he interrupted gently. "If you are interested in the ideas, I would be delighted to discuss them. It is rare to find someone at these gatherings who cares about anything beyond gossip and appearances." Amabel hesitated. She glanced past him at the ballroom, where Clara stood in a circle of admirers. Where the Dowager Duchess was no doubt searching for her son. "You should be out there," Amabel said, "meeting your guests." "I am meeting a guest," he replied, "one who appears far more interesting than those who are trying so hard to be noticed." Something in his tone made her look at him more carefully. There was no artifice in his expression, no social performance, just genuine curiosity. "The author makes a compelling argument," Amabel said slowly, testing the waters. "Education should not be a privilege of birth, it should be a right." George's expression shifted, became more animated. "Exactly. I have been trying to establish a school on my estate, for all children, not just those whose parents can afford tutors." He paused, studying her face. "You disagree with something. I can see it in your eyes." "Not disagree," Amabel said, "only that the author stops short. Education without opportunity is just another cage. What use is teaching a girl to think if she has no path beyond marriage and obedience?" His smile was slow and genuine. What use indeed? They stood there, too close for propriety, the noise of the ball fading to background. Amabel felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest, not just the pleasure of intellectual exchange, though that was rare enough, something deeper, the sensation of being seen. George took a half-step closer. "What is your name?" "Amabel Thornton. Miss Thornton." His voice made her name sound important. "Tell me, what would you do if women had the opportunities you speak of?" "I would study law," she said without thinking, then paused, shocked at herself. She had never said that aloud, had barely admitted it to herself. "Law," he repeated. "Not music or watercolors, or the other acceptable accomplishments. Those are lovely, but they are not mine." Amabel felt heat in her cheeks, but pressed on. "I want to understand how society is structured, how power moves through it, how to change what is unjust." The intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "Revolutionary thinking, Miss Thornton. Is that disapproval I hear, Your Grace?" "Admiration," he corrected. "Pure admiration." The moment stretched between them, alive with possibility. Amabel noticed details she should not notice, the way his jaw tightened when he looked at her, the slight quickening of his breath, the distance between them, shrinking incrementally. Then a voice cut through the intimacy like a blade. "George." The Dowager Duchess stood 10 feet away, her expression arctic. "Come. The beautiful one is waiting." The words landed like a slap. The beautiful one. As if Clara were an object, as if Amabel were not even worth naming. George's expression hardened. "Mother, I am conversing with Miss Thornton. You are neglecting your duties." The Dowager's tone allowed no argument. "Your guests expect your attention. The appropriate guests." The emphasis on appropriate was unmistakable. George held Amabel's gaze for one more moment. In it she read frustration, anger, and something that looked like regret. Then he turned to his mother. "I will join you momentarily. Now, George." It was not a request. It was a command, delivered by a woman accustomed to obedience. George looked back at Amabel. "This conversation is not finished, Miss Thornton." Then he was gone, swept into the glittering crowd by his mother's iron will. Amabel watched him go, her heart pounding in a way it never had before. She pressed the book against her chest and tried to steady her breathing. What had just happened? A duke, a man of immense wealth and power, had chosen to speak with her, had looked at her as though she mattered, as though her thoughts and words were valuable. Across the room, she saw her mother glaring at her, saw Clara's worried glance, saw the Dowager Duchess positioning George near Clara with the efficiency of a general moving troops. George stood beside Clara now, speaking to her with appropriate courtesy. But even from this distance, Amabel could see the difference. He was performing, going through motions. His face held none of the animation it had shown moments before, and once, just once, his gaze found hers across the crowded room. The look lasted only a second, but in that second, everything changed. Amabel tucked the book back onto the shelf with trembling hands. She knew what would happen now. The gossip would start. The disapproval would mount. Her mother would be furious that she had distracted the Duke from Clara, even for a moment. But beneath the fear and the certainty of coming reproach, something else bloomed. Hope. Dangerous, foolish hope. Because for the first time in her life, someone had looked at Amabel Thornton and seen not the invisible daughter, not the rejected sister, not the plain disappointment. He had seen her, and she had no idea what to do with that knowledge. The first visit came 3 days after the ball. Amabel was in the library as usual when she heard the commotion. The butler's formal announcement, her mother's excited gasp, the rustle of skirts as Clara was summoned to the drawing room. The Duke of Ashworth had come to call. Amabel remained where she was, curled in her chair with a book of legal philosophy she had borrowed from her father's collection without asking. She would not be needed. This performance was Clara's alone. But 20 minutes later, the drawing room door opened, and her mother's voice called out, sharp with irritation, "Amabel, you are wanted." She set down her book, confused. Wanted for what? To serve as witness to Clara's triumph, to make the numbers even for tea. She entered the drawing room to find a peculiar tableau. Clara sat on the settee, posture perfect, smile fixed. Their mother hovered nearby like an anxious chaperone, and George stood by the window, looking distinctly uncomfortable in the role he was supposed to be playing. His eyes found Amabel immediately. "Miss Thornton," he said, and something in his voice relaxed. "I was just telling Miss Clara about the school I mentioned at the ball. I thought perhaps you might have thoughts on the curriculum." Her mother's expression soured. "Amabel has no expertise in such matters, Your Grace." "On the contrary," George replied smoothly. "Miss Thornton expressed very insightful opinions on education and opportunity. I would value her perspective. It was expertly done, polite enough that her mother could not object without appearing rude, but transparent enough that everyone in the room understood what was happening. He had not come for Clara, he had come for her." Amabel saw her sister's face carefully compose itself, saw the flicker of understanding, then something that looked almost like relief. Clara understood better than anyone what it felt like to be pursued for the wrong reasons. "Please, sit," George said, gesturing to a chair near where he stood. Amabel sat. Her mother's displeasure radiated like heat. For the next hour, they discussed education. George described his plans for the school with genuine passion. He wanted to teach more than basic literacy. He wanted history, mathematics, even rudimentary science for children who would normally have none of these opportunities. "But how will you overcome resistance from the families?" Amabel asked. "Many parents need their children working, not studying." "I have considered that," George said, leaning forward slightly. "What if the school operated in the evenings, after work hours? And what if attendance came with certain benefits? Access to the estate physician, perhaps, or priority for positions as the children mature?" "You would use incentive rather than mandate," Amabel said slowly. "Allow choice while making education the rational choice." "Exactly." His smile was quick and genuine. "You see the complexity immediately." Clara sat silent through most of this, occasionally offering polite comments that were clearly designed to remind everyone she was present. Their mother grew increasingly agitated, her teacup rattling against the saucer. When George finally took his leave, he bowed to Clara first, as propriety demanded. Then he turned to Amabel. "Thank you for the conversation, Miss Thornton. It has been most illuminating." The emphasis on most was subtle but unmistakable. After he left, the silence in the drawing room felt suffocating. "What?" her mother finally said, her voice shaking with anger. "Do you think you are doing?" "I was answering questions," Amabel replied quietly. "You were positioning yourself. You were trying to steal your sister's suitor. I did nothing of the sort." Amabel looked at Clara. "Did I?" Clara met her eyes. "No," she said softly. "You did not." Their mother turned on Clara. "You sat there like a statue. You let her monopolize the conversation." "He asked her questions," Clara said. "I could hardly interrupt to discuss topics I know nothing about." "Then learn them," their mother snapped. "Pretend interest if you must. But you will not lose this match because your sister cannot keep silent." Amabel felt heat flood her face. "I will be more careful in future." "You will be absent in future," her mother corrected. "The next time the Duke calls, you will be indisposed. But the next visit came the following afternoon, unannounced. George arrived with books, 3 volumes on legal theory and social reform wrapped in brown paper. "For Miss Amabel Thornton," he told the butler. "I promised to lend them to her." Amabel was fetched. She came downstairs to find him in the entrance hall, the books in his hands. His expression carefully neutral. "Your Grace," she said, "this is too generous." "It is practical," he replied. "You cannot form opinions without access to the arguments." He held out the books. "I would very much like to hear your thoughts when you have finished." Their fingers brushed as she took them. The contact lasted a fraction too long. "I look forward to your next visit," he added, his voice dropping slightly, "to continuing our conversation." She understood what he was not saying. He would return. He would keep returning. And each time, he would find ways to speak with her. Over the next 2 weeks, a pattern emerged. George would arrive at proper calling hours with proper gifts and proper manners. He would speak to Clara first, fulfilling social obligation. He would compliment her dress, inquire about her health, discuss safe topics like weather and music. But then, always, he would turn the conversation. He would mention a book or an idea or a question, and Amabel, despite her mother's warning glares, would be drawn in. They discussed property law and tenant rights. They debated the role of aristocracy in modern governance. They argued about whether reform should come from above or below, their voices growing animated, their words tumbling over each other in the way of people who had found intellectual equals. Clara watched these exchanges with increasing understanding. She began to excuse herself early, claiming headaches or prior engagements, creating space for what everyone knew was happening. George was courting Amabel, not with flowers or pretty words, not with the performance expected of aristocratic courtship, but with respect, with genuine interest, with the gift of attention that made Amabel feel for the first time that her mind mattered as much as any woman's face. One afternoon, as rain drummed against the windows, George brought news of progress on the school. The building was nearly finished. He wanted Amabel to see it. "Perhaps Miss Clara would enjoy a tour as well," their mother said quickly, desperately trying to redirect his attention. "I would be delighted to include Miss Clara," George replied with perfect courtesy, "though I suspect the technical details of architectural planning might bore her." Clara smiled. "You are correct, Your Grace, but I am certain Amabel would find it fascinating. It was surrender, graceful and kind, but surrender nonetheless." The tour was arranged for the following week. Proper chaperones would attend, of course. Everything would be correct and appropriate, but as George took his leave that day, he paused near Amabel. His hand moved as though to touch hers, then stopped, hovering in the space between them. "I find myself," he said quietly, "thinking about our conversations when I should be attending to other matters. It is most distracting. Is that a complaint, Your Grace?" "An observation, Miss Thornton." His eyes held hers. "One I felt you should know." Then he was gone, leaving Amabel standing in the drawing room, her heart racing, her thoughts in chaos. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she allowed herself to imagine the impossible. A man like George choosing a woman like her, not despite her mind, but because of it. Not settling for the invisible daughter, but actively wanting her. It was dangerous thinking, foolish thinking, but she could not make herself stop. Somewhere in the house, she heard Clara moving about. Her sister had been kind through all of this, had not blamed Amabel for stealing what should have been hers. Tomorrow, Amabel decided, she would talk to Clara, would make sure her sister truly understood what was happening, would offer to withdraw if Clara wanted George for herself. But even as she made the resolution, she knew the truth. She did not want to withdraw. For the first time in her life, Amabel wanted something, wanted someone. And terrifyingly, impossibly, he seemed to want her too. The tour of the school building had been appropriately brief and appropriately boring for everyone except Amabel and George. The Dowager Duchess had accompanied them, her presence a cold shadow of disapproval. She had watched every interaction with hawkish intensity, her lips pressed into a thin line of displeasure. Clara had come as well, playing her role with weary grace. And Amabel's mother had hovered, torn between hope that Clara might still capture the Duke's attention and fury that Amabel continued to monopolize it. But the building itself had been beautiful, Simple, well-designed, with large windows to let in light and space enough for 60 children. George had explained every detail with quiet pride, and Amabel had asked questions that clearly delighted him. After the tour, the dowager announced she needed to speak with the builder about final payments. Clara complained of fatigue and requested to rest in the drawing room. Amabel's mother had no choice but to accompany Clara as chaperone, which left George and Amabel standing alone in the entrance hall. "Walk with me," George said quietly. "The gardens are pleasant this time of year." It was not quite proper, but with the chaperones nearby and the gardens visible from multiple windows, it was acceptable enough. They walked in silence at first, following a gravel path between rose bushes that had finished blooming. The November air held a crisp edge, but the sun was warm enough to make the walk comfortable. Amabel was intensely aware of George beside her. The space between them felt charged, alive with something neither had yet named. "I must tell you something," George said finally. His voice was low, serious. "Something I suspect you already know." Amabel's heart began to race. "Yes? This courtship, these visits, they are not what my mother believes they are. They are not what your parents hope they are." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "I am not pursuing your sister." "I know," Amabel said quietly. "Do you know why?" She met his eyes. "Because you do not want a marriage built on negotiations and appearances." "Yes." His gaze was intense. "But more than that. I have spent 3 years in a marriage where I was valued for my title and my fortune, where every conversation was calculated, every moment performed, where I felt utterly alone even when we occupied the same room." He paused, his jaw tightening. "I will not do that again. I cannot." "What do you want?" Amabel asked. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "I want to feel alive again. I want conversations that challenge me. I want someone who sees beyond the title to the man beneath." He took a step closer. "I want what I found that night at the ball, when I discovered a woman reading in a corner instead of performing in the center." The intensity in his voice made her breath catch. "Your Grace." "George," he interrupted. "When we are alone, call me George." "George." His name felt intimate on her tongue. "This cannot work. You know it cannot." "Why not?" "Because I am not what society expects. I am not beautiful like Clara. I am not charming or accomplished in the acceptable ways. Your mother wants you to marry the prettiest bride society can offer, and that will never be me." His hand moved as though to touch her face, then stopped, trembling in the air between them. "Do you truly not see yourself? What is there to see?" She tried to keep the bitterness from her voice and failed. "I am plain, serious, difficult. I have been told so my entire life. You are extraordinary." The word was fierce. "You are brilliant and honest and brave enough to think thoughts most women are taught to suppress. You challenge me. You interest me. You make me want to be better than I am." He finally let his hand fall, but his eyes never left hers. "That is infinitely more valuable than a pretty face. The world will not agree with you. Then the world is wrong." They stood there, too close, breathing the same air. Amabel felt something unfurling inside her chest. Something that felt dangerous and necessary all at once. "Your mother will never accept this," she said. "My mother does not govern my heart. My parents will be devastated. They need the alliance with your family. We have debts, George, serious debts. If I ruin Clara's chances—" "I know about the debts," he said gently. "I have known since before the ball. Your father's solicitor approached mine weeks ago. The confession stunned her. You knew? All this time? Yes. And you still chose to pursue me, especially then." He took another step closer. "Do you not see, Amabel? If I offered financial help to secure a marriage with Clara, it would be a transaction. She would never know if I wanted her or simply pitied your family. But with you there is no pretense, no performance, just truth." His hand rose again, and this time it did not stop. His fingers brushed her cheek, so light she might have imagined it. The touch sent heat flooding through her. "I am not asking you to be something you are not," he said softly. "I am asking you to be exactly what you are, with me. Amabel's breath came faster. She knew she should step back, should maintain proper distance, should think about consequences and propriety and all the reasons this was impossible. Instead, she swayed closer. George made a sound low in his throat. His hand moved from her cheek to her jaw, cradling her face with surprising tenderness. His thumb traced her lower lip, and she gasped at the sensation. "Tell me to stop," he said, his voice rough. "Tell me this is unwanted, and I will never touch you again." "It is not unwanted." The words barely left her lips before his mouth was on hers. The kiss was nothing like she had imagined kisses would be. It was not gentle or tentative. It was hungry and desperate and real. His lips moved against hers with barely controlled intensity, and she responded without thinking, rising on her toes to meet him. His arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her close. She felt the hard length of his body against hers, felt the rapid beat of his heart matching her own. Her hands found his shoulders, then his neck, her fingers threading into his hair. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, George rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that since the moment I saw you reading," he confessed. "I did not think anyone would ever want to kiss me. Then you have not been paying attention." His smile was crooked, almost boyish. "I think about kissing you constantly. It is becoming a problem." A laugh escaped her, unexpected and bright. "A problem. A very serious problem." He pulled back slightly to look at her, his expression softening. "Amabel, I need you to understand something. This is not a game to me. This is not rebellion against my mother or fascination with something forbidden. This is real." The weight of his words settled over her. Real. This was real. Footsteps crunched on the gravel path. They sprang apart, just as the Dowager Duchess rounded the corner, her face a mask of cold fury. "George," she said icily, "we are leaving. Now." George straightened, his expression closing. "Mother, I will join you shortly." "Now," she repeated. The single word carried the force of years of command. He looked at Amabel one last time. His eyes promised this was not over. Then he turned and followed his mother toward the house, his posture rigid with barely contained anger. Amabel stood alone in the garden, her lips still burning from his kiss, her heart racing with equal parts exhilaration and terror. Everything had changed, and she had no idea what would happen next. But as she pressed her fingers to her lips, still feeling the phantom pressure of his mouth on hers, one thing became abundantly clear. She was falling in love with George Ashworth. And judging by the fury in the Dowager Duchess's eyes, that love was about to be tested in ways she could not yet imagine. If this story has touched your heart, if you have felt Amabel's invisible pain or George's desperate search for something real, I would be honored if you subscribe to this channel. And here is something I am curious about. If you could give Amabel one piece of advice right now, knowing what is coming, what would you tell her? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and your words become part of this journey we are taking together. The summons came before breakfast. Amabel was called to her father's study, a room she had entered perhaps 3 times in her entire life. The heavy oak door felt like a barrier to judgment. Inside, her father stood behind his desk, his face mottled with rage. "Close the door," he said. She obeyed, her hands trembling slightly. He did not invite her to sit. He simply stared at her for a long moment, his breathing audible in the silent room. "Do you have any idea what you have done?" Amabel remained silent. There was no safe answer. "The Dowager Duchess sent word this morning." Her father's voice shook. "She has withdrawn her son from consideration of this family, completely. She called your behavior disgraceful. She said you threw yourself at the Duke in the most shameless manner imaginable." "That is not what happened," Amabel said quietly. "Then what did happen? Tell me how you managed to destroy your sister's future, our family's salvation, in a single afternoon." "We spoke. We walked in the garden. That is all. That is not all." Her father's fist came down on the desk. "You made a spectacle of yourself. You distracted him from Clara. You behaved in a manner unbefitting any respectable woman, and now we are ruined. Do you understand? Ruined." The word hung in the air like a death sentence. "I did not ask for his attention," Amabel said, finding her voice. "I did not pursue him, but you accepted it, you encouraged it." Her father's eyes were cold with fury. "You knew what was at stake. You knew Clara needed this match, and you sabotaged it anyway out of—" What? Jealousy? Spite? The accusation hit like a slap. No, never that. Then what? What could possibly justify what you have done? For the first time in her life, Amabel felt something crack inside her, some wall she had built to contain years of being overlooked, dismissed, erased. The anger rose hot and fierce. "Maybe I wanted to exist," she said, her voice rising. "Maybe I wanted to be something other than invisible. Maybe I wanted someone to see me as more than the disappointing daughter who should have the decency to disappear." Her father's expression hardened. "So this was about you, your feelings, your desires, while your family faces destitution. This was never about me. This was about a man who did not want the marriage you were trying to arrange. He made that clear, to everyone. He would have accepted Clara if you had not interfered, would he?" Amabel met her father's eyes. "Or would he have gone through with a marriage that made him miserable, that made Clara miserable simply because you needed the money? Is that what you wanted for your daughter? To be sold to a man who did not want her? Watch your tongue." "No." The word came out sharp, final. "I will not watch my tongue. I will not apologize for existing. I will not disappear to make things convenient for everyone else. I have done that my entire life, and it has not made me less of a burden. It has only made me less of a person." Her father stared at her as though seeing her for the first time, and what he saw appeared to disgust him. "You will stay in this house," he said coldly. "You will not accept callers. You will not attend any social functions. You will make yourself as invisible as you claim to have been. And perhaps we can salvage something from this disaster. And if the Duke calls for me specifically, he will not." Her father's smile was cruel. "The Dowager has made certain of that." The door opened before Amabel could respond. Clara stood in the doorway, still in her morning dress, her face pale but determined. "Father," she said quietly, "I would like to speak with you." "Not now, Clara." "Yes, now." Clara stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. "I need to tell you something I should have said weeks ago." Their father's expression shifted to confusion. "What are you talking about?" "I do not want to marry the Duke." Clara's voice was steady, clear. "I never wanted to marry him. I was willing to do it because you asked, because I thought I had no choice. But I do not love him. I could never love him. And he does not love me." "Love is not required for a successful marriage," their father said. "Perhaps not. But respect is. Mutual regard is. And the Duke regards Amabel in a way he never regarded me." Clara looked at her sister, and something passed between them. Understanding. Solidarity. She continued. "He sees her, he values her, he chose her father. Not because Amabel interfered, but because she is what he wants." "Then he is a fool," their father snapped. "No." Clara's voice was firm. "He is honest. More honest than we have been." She paused, drawing a breath. "There is something else you should know. Captain Hendricks has returned from India." The name fell like a stone into still water. Amabel watched her father's face pale. "That is impossible," he said. "He arrived in London last month. He wrote to me." Clara's hands twisted together, but her voice remained steady. "He asked if my feelings had changed, if I might still consider his suit." "Absolutely not." Her father's anger redirected entirely to Clara now. "That man has no fortune, no estate, nothing to offer you. He offers what the Duke offers Amabel. Love. Respect. A partnership built on something real. This is your sister's doing," their father said, pointing at Amabel. "She has poisoned your mind with these romantic notions. Amabel has done nothing but be honest." Clara stepped closer to their father, her expression pleading. "Father, please. The Duke will not solve our problems. Even if he had chosen me, even if we had married, do you truly believe his mother would have allowed him to be generous to us? She despises our family now. She would have made certain any settlement was minimal, any assistance grudging. Their father sank into his chair, suddenly looking much older. "Then we are lost." "Perhaps," Clara said softly. "Or perhaps we find another way. I could work. Amabel could work. We could economize, sell what we must, live more simply." "Work?" The word came out strangled. "My daughters, working like common servants. Better that than living as beautiful corpses," Amabel said quietly. "Better that than sacrificing everything we are for the appearance of what we should be." The silence that followed was heavy with defeat. Their father sat with his head in his hands, the fight gone out of him. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. "Leave me." The sisters left together. In the hallway, Clara reached for Amabel's hand and squeezed it tight. "Thank you," Amabel whispered. "For what?" "For not hating me." Clara stopped, turning to face her sister fully. "I could never hate you. If anything, I envy you." "Envy me?" "You had the courage to want something, to reach for it." "I have spent my entire life being what everyone else wanted me to be." Clara's eyes glistened. "Maybe it is time I learned to be myself." They stood there, two sisters who had lived parallel lives finally intersecting, finally seeing each other clearly. "What will you do?" Amabel asked. "About Captain Hendricks?" "I do not know yet." Clara's smile was tentative but real. "But I think I would like to find out if what we had was real, if it could be real again." "And the Duke? If he wants you, truly wants you, then he will find a way." Clara's expression grew serious. "But Amabel, you must understand. His mother will never accept this. The society we live in will never accept this. You will face opposition at every turn." "I know. Is he worth it?" Amabel thought of George's eyes when he looked at her, the way he listened when she spoke, the feeling of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in her life. "Yes," she said. "He is worth it." Clara pulled her into an embrace. "Then fight for him, sister. Fight for yourself because no one else will." They held each other in the dim hallway, two women who had been shaped by the same cruel expectations, finally choosing to reshape themselves. When they separated, Clara wiped her eyes and smiled. "Now shall we see about writing to Captain Hendricks? I believe I owe him a very overdue letter." As they walked toward Clara's room, Amabel felt something shift inside her. Hope, yes, but more than that, determination. George had chosen her. Against his mother's wishes, against society's expectations, he had chosen her. Now she needed to prove she was brave enough to choose him back, whatever that cost. The letter arrived 5 days after the confrontation with her father. Amabel recognized the handwriting immediately, bold, precise strokes on expensive paper. She broke the seal with trembling fingers. "Miss Thornton, I am told my mother has caused great distress to your family. I am told you have been blamed for circumstances beyond your control. I am told many things, none of which change the fundamental truth. I chose you. I choose you still. If you are willing, I would like to speak with you. Not in your home where your parents might prevent honest conversation. Not in mine, where my mother exercises absolute control. But somewhere neutral. Somewhere we might speak freely about what happens next. The Rose and Crown Inn maintains private dining rooms for respectable parties. I have reserved one for tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Your sister is welcome to accompany you as chaperone, if that provides comfort. I understand if you refuse this invitation. I understand if the cost of continuing this acquaintance has become too high, but I hope, desperately hope, that you will come. Yours, George. Amabel read the letter 3 times, her heart pounding harder with each reading. Clara found her still holding it an hour later. "What does it say?" she asked gently. Amabel handed her the letter. Clara read it quickly, then looked up with wide eyes. "You must go. Father has forbidden me to see him. Father is not the master of your heart." Clara's expression was fierce. "This man is offering you a choice, Amabel. Not a transaction, not an arrangement. A choice. Do not let fear steal that from you." So the next day they went. Clara as chaperone, though both knew the propriety was thin at best. The Rose and Crown was respectable enough, but a lady meeting a gentleman in a private dining room would still raise eyebrows. George was already there when they arrived. He rose immediately, his eyes fixed on Amabel with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Miss Thornton," he said. "Miss Clara, thank you for coming." Clara smiled. "I will wait in the main room," she said, "within earshot should you need me, but I believe you two have much to discuss." She left before either could protest, closing the door behind her with a soft click. The silence stretched between them. Amabel could not look away from George's face. He looked tired, she realized, as though he had not slept well in days. "Please sit," he said finally. They sat across from each other at the small table. A pot of tea had been prepared, but neither reached for it. "I need to tell you something," George said. His voice was steady, but his hands resting on the table were tense. "I know about your family's debts, the exact amounts, the creditors, the timeline. My solicitor made inquiries weeks ago before the ball." Amabel felt heat flood her cheeks. "You investigated us?" "I investigated the situation I was being pushed into," he corrected gently. "My mother does not make social decisions lightly. When she insisted I consider your sister, I wanted to understand why. What I discovered was a family in financial distress and a beautiful daughter being positioned as the solution." "We are that obvious," Amabel said bitterly. "You are that desperate. There is no shame in it. Half the estates in England survive on strategic marriages." But George leaned forward, his eyes intent. "I need you to understand something crucial. I did not pursue you out of pity. I did not seek you out because I felt obligated to save your family. I found you because you were the only real thing in that entire ballroom. Then why tell me this now? Because I am going to offer your father financial assistance." His words came quick, urgent. "And I need you to know it has nothing to do with courting you. Nothing to do with purchasing your affection or creating obligation. I am doing it because your family should not suffer for my mother's vindictiveness or for the crime of having a daughter who dared to be interesting." Amabel stared at him. "You would help us? Even though your mother has forbidden it?" "My mother does not control my finances or my decisions." George's jaw tightened. "She controls my estate, yes, and the household, and she wields considerable social influence. But I am not a child, and I will not be governed by her need to maintain appearances at the cost of everything meaningful. Your mother will be furious. My mother is already furious." George smiled without humor. "She has been planning a gala, a grand event where I am to publicly declare my choice of bride. She has invited half of London society, and she intends to parade appropriate candidates before me like livestock at a fair. When? 3 weeks hence. And she expects you to choose someone she approves of. She expects me to choose someone beautiful, socially connected, and utterly compliant." His eyes held Amabel's. "She expects me to choose anyone except you." Amabel's throat tightened. "Perhaps you should." George stood abruptly, crossed to her side of the table, and knelt beside her chair. The position put their eyes nearly level. "Do you want me to choose someone else?" he asked. "Tell me honestly. If you do not want this, if the cost is too high, I will accept it. But do not make that decision for me. I am not what she wants for you. You are what I want for myself." His hand reached out, hovering near hers. "May I?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid and real. "Amabel, I spent 3 years in a marriage where I was an accessory, a title and fortune attached to a man my wife barely knew. I will not do that again. I would rather be alone than be invisible in my own home." "You would not be invisible with someone else, someone appropriate. I was invisible to everyone else, only you looked at me and saw more than a duke." He squeezed her hand gently. "You saw a man who builds schools and worries about tenant rights and reads radical essays on education reform. You saw me, Amabel, the way I see you." Tears burned behind her eyes. She blinked them back fiercely. "I want to court you properly," George said. "Not in secret, not in shame. I want to stand beside you at that gala and declare, before my mother and all of society, that you are my choice. But I need to know if that is what you want. Your mother will make my life unbearable. She will try." His smile was grim. "But I have resources. position, and I am prepared to use both to protect you. The society gossip alone could destroy me. Only if you let it." George's voice was fierce now. "Only if you believe their judgment matters more than your own heart. I know what I am asking of you, Amabel. I know the cost, but I am asking anyway because I believe you are brave enough to pay it." She looked at their joined hands, thought about everything she would face, the whispers, the social exile, the constant battle against a world that believed beauty was currency and compliance was virtue. Then she thought about George's eyes when he looked at her, the conversations that made her feel alive, the possibility of a life where she mattered. "Yes," she said quietly, then louder with conviction. "Yes, I want this. I want you." The relief on his face was profound. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles with a tenderness that made her ache. "Then we face them together," he said. "My mother, your parents, all of them." "Together," she agreed. A knock sounded on the door. George released her hand reluctantly and returned to his seat as Clara entered. "All is well?" she asked, looking between them. "All is well," George confirmed. "Though I suspect it is about to become significantly more complicated." Clara's smile was knowing. The best things always are. They left the inn together, Clara chattering about inconsequential things to provide cover. But Amabel barely heard her. Her mind was already racing ahead to the gala, to the confrontation with the Dowager, to everything that would come. 3 weeks. That was all the time they had to prepare. 3 weeks before George would stand before society and choose the invisible daughter over every acceptable alternative. 3 weeks before Amabel would discover if she was truly brave enough to claim the life she wanted. As they climbed into the carriage, Amabel looked back at the inn. George stood in the doorway watching them leave. Their eyes met across the distance, and he placed his hand over his heart. The gesture was small, private, meant only for her, but it spoke volumes. She was his choice, and he was hers. Now they just had to survive long enough to make that choice matter. The days leading to the gala passed in a blur of tension and whispered strategy. George came to call twice more, both visits strained and formal under her mother's watchful eye. They spoke of trivial things, while their eyes said everything else. Each visit ended too quickly, leaving Amabel aching with words unspoken and touches denied. The Dowager's campaign against her had intensified. Rumors spread through London drawing rooms like poison. The invisible daughter who had ensnared the Duke, the plain sister who had used manipulation to steal her beautiful sibling's rightful place, the social climber who had thrown herself shamelessly at a grieving widower. Amabel heard the whispers even when people thought she could not. They cut deep, but she held her head high. George had chosen her. That truth mattered more than 1,000 cruel tongues. 3 days before the gala, George sent word. He needed to see her, not at her home where every word would be monitored, not at his, where his mother held dominion. He had arranged something else. A cottage on the edge of his estate, he wrote. "Owned by my family, but currently vacant. We could speak privately there. Clara may accompany you if you wish. I simply need to see you away from watching eyes, to know you are truly certain before we face what is coming." Clara read the note and looked at Amabel with knowing eyes. "You should go alone," she said quietly. "That would be improper. So is half of what you are doing." Clara smiled. "Besides, I trust him. More importantly, you trust him. Go, Amabel. Talk. Be honest with each other about what comes next." So Amabel went, her heart pounding with each step closer to the cottage. It was small but well-maintained, tucked among trees that provided shelter from view. Smoke rose from the chimney, promising warmth inside. George opened the door before she could knock. Relief flooded his features. "You came," he said simply. "Did you doubt I would? Every moment until I saw you." He stepped back, allowing her entry. The cottage was modest but comfortable. A fire burned in the hearth, tea had been prepared. Everything was proper, respectable, except for the fact that they were entirely alone. Amabel removed her cloak. George hung it carefully, then stood there not quite touching her, drinking in the sight of her as though memorizing every detail. "Tell me you are certain," he said finally. Tell me you understand what you are facing. I understand. My mother has been relentless. She has contacted every influential family in London. She has made it clear that anyone who accepts you accepts my defiance, that anyone who supports us will lose her favor. I know. The rumors about you are vicious. Untrue, but vicious. His jaw tightened. If I could stop them, you cannot. Amabel stepped closer. We both know this. Your mother wields social power like a weapon, and she will use it against me without mercy. But George, I have spent my entire life invisible. If becoming visible means facing cruelty, then I choose visibility. He made a sound low in his throat. How are you so brave? I am not brave. I am terrified. But I am also tired of hiding. The distance between them felt charged, alive with everything they had been holding back. George's hands flexed at his sides, as though he wanted to reach for her, but was restraining himself. I am trying very hard to be honorable right now, he said, his voice rough. But having you here alone, it is testing every resolution I have made. What resolutions? To court you properly. To wait until we are married before I... He stopped, closing his eyes briefly. Before I touch you the way I want to touch you. Amabel's breath caught. And if I said I did not want to wait? His eyes snapped open, dark with desire. Amabel, we do not know what will happen at the gala. Your mother could find some way to separate us. My family could interfere. 1,000 things could go wrong. She moved closer until only inches remained between them. I do not want to live with regret. I do not want to wonder what it would have been like to be yours completely. You are asking me to compromise you. I'm asking you to love me. Here, now, before the world tries to tear us apart. For a long moment, George simply looked at her. Then his control shattered. His hands came up to cradle her face with exquisite gentleness. I love you, he said fiercely. I need you to know that. This is not passion without substance. This is love. I love you, she whispered back. Then he was kissing her, deep and desperate, and claiming. His hands slid from her face to her shoulders, pulling her against him. Amabel wound her arms around his neck, rising on her toes to meet him fully. The kiss broke and reformed, again and again, neither able to get close enough. George's lips traced her jaw, her neck, the sensitive hollow beneath her ear. Amabel gasped, her fingers threading into his hair. Tell me to stop, he murmured against her skin. Tell me this is too much. Do not stop. Please, do not stop. He lifted her, carried her to the small bedroom where the fire had been lit earlier. The room was warm, intimate, perfect. He set her down gently, his hands already reaching for the buttons of her dress. May I? He asked, his voice shaking slightly. Yes. Each button was released with careful reverence, as though he were unwrapping something precious. When her dress fell away, she stood before him in her chemise, vulnerable and trembling. But George's eyes held no judgment, only wonder. You are beautiful, he said, every part of you. Her hands found the buttons of his shirt. Let me see you too. They undressed each other slowly, learning the landscape of skin and breath and heartbeat. When finally they came together, it was with tenderness that made tears spring to Amabel's eyes. George kissed them away. We have all the time you need, he promised. This is about us. Only us. What followed was gentle and consuming all at once. George touched her as though she were made of starlight, precious and breakable. His hands traced paths of fire across her skin. His lips followed, worshipping every inch he discovered. Amabel learned the taste of his neck, the sound he made when she kissed the hollow of his throat. She felt the tremor in his hands as he held himself back, making sure she felt only pleasure, only safety, only love. When they finally joined, Amabel gasped at the intimacy of it. Not just the physical connection, though that was overwhelming, but the way George looked at her as though she were his entire world, the way he murmured her name like a prayer, the way he moved with her, patient and reverent and completely present. I love you, he whispered against her lips. Now and always. Now and always, she echoed. After, they lay tangled together beneath quilts, the fire casting golden light across their skin. George traced lazy patterns on her shoulder, while Amabel listened to his heartbeat beneath her ear. "No regrets?" he asked softly. "None." She tilted her head to look at him. "You. Only that we cannot stay here forever." He kissed her forehead. "I would keep you in this moment, away from everything waiting for us. We face it together," she reminded him. "That was our promise." Together, he agreed. They talked for hours, sometimes serious, sometimes laughing at nothing at all. George told her about his plans for the estate, the reforms he wanted to implement. Amabel shared her dreams of studying law, of perhaps writing, of using whatever position she gained as his duchess to advocate for changes. "You will be magnificent," George said, his voice full of pride. "A duchess who actually makes a difference. If your mother does not kill me first. She will try." His expression turned serious. "The gala will be her final attempt to break us. She has invited everyone who matters in society. She will parade other candidates before me. She will create situations designed to humiliate you. Then we will need to be stronger than her schemes." His arms tightened around her. "I will not let her hurt you." "She already has," Amabel said honestly. "But it does not matter, because this, what we have, it is worth any price." They fell asleep eventually, wrapped around each other, storing up strength for what was coming. When Amabel woke near dawn, George was watching her, his expression soft with affection. "Good morning," he murmured. "Good morning." She touched his face, needing to confirm he was real. "Are you ready? For the gala? For my mother's fury? For society's judgment?" His smile was crooked. "No. But I am ready to stand beside you through all of it." They dressed slowly, stealing kisses between buttons and laces. When they were finally presentable, George pulled her close one last time. After the gala, he said, "Regardless of how my mother reacts, I am asking you properly, with a ring and witnesses and everything correct. Will you marry me, Amabel Thornton?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. 1,000 times, yes. The ride back to her home was quiet but not uncomfortable. They held hands in the carriage, knowing these might be their last peaceful moments for some time. 2 days until the gala, George said as they approached her house. 2 days until we show society what real choice looks like. Amabel squeezed his hand. "I am ready." And as she watched him drive away, she realized it was true. Whatever came next, whatever storms they would face, she was ready. Because she was no longer the invisible daughter. She was a woman in love, fighting for her own life, and that made her unstoppable. The ballroom at Ashworth Manor had never looked more magnificent or more menacing. Every candelabra blazed. Every mirror reflected a sea of silk and jewels. The cream of London society had gathered, drawn by curiosity and the Dowager Duchess's formidable influence. They came to witness the Duke's choice. They came expecting a spectacle. They would not be disappointed. Amabel stood near the entrance with Clara, her hands trembling inside her gloves. She wore a dress of deep emerald, not the grey her mother had tried to insist upon. Clara had helped her choose it, had helped arrange her hair in a style that framed her face rather than hiding it. "You look beautiful," Clara whispered, "truly beautiful. I feel like I'm about to face a firing squad. You're facing them with your head high. That is what matters." Clara squeezed her hand. "And you are not alone." Their parents stood apart from them, faces set in expressions of barely concealed mortification. The Thornton family had become an object of gossip, and they blamed Amabel entirely. The Dowager Duchess swept into view, resplendent in black silk and sapphires. Her eyes passed over Amabel with open contempt before she turned to greet more important guests. "She has assembled quite the collection," Clara murmured. "Look." Amabel looked. Beautiful women clustered throughout the room like expensive ornaments. Each was perfectly presented, impeccably connected and clearly positioned to catch the Duke's attention. The Dowager's strategy was transparent. Bury Amabel in a sea of more suitable options. The crowd parted, and George entered. He wore formal evening attire that made him look every inch the powerful Duke he was. His expression was controlled, unreadable. But when his eyes found Amabel across the crowded room, something shifted, softened, became unmistakably tender. The Dowager noticed immediately. She moved to intercept him, her hand closing on his arm with possessive force. "George, darling," she said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "Come. Lady Catherine Ashford is most eager to speak with you. And Miss Pemberton has asked after your health. Such lovely girls, both of them." George removed his mother's hand from his arm with careful deliberation. "Later, Mother. There is someone I must greet first." He crossed the ballroom with purpose. Conversations died in his wake. Every eye tracked his movement. The speculation was palpable, hungry. He stopped before Amabel and bowed. "Miss Thornton, you look extraordinary. Your Grace." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Would you walk with me? There is something I wish to show you." It was not truly a question, and it was certainly not proper to single her out so immediately, so publicly. But Amabel placed her hand on his offered arm, and they walked through the silent crowd like royalty. The Dowager's face had gone white with fury, but she could not make a scene, not yet, not with everyone watching. George led Amabel to the terrace. The cool night air was a relief after the stifling ballroom. Behind them, the whispers exploded like a dam breaking. "They know what this means," Amabel said quietly. "Good. Let them know." George turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I'm tired of pretending. Tired of playing games my mother orchestrates. Tired of living according to rules designed to keep us all miserable. Your mother will never forgive this. I do not require her forgiveness. I require only your answer." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "I asked you this 2 days ago in private. Now I ask you before God and society and everyone who thinks they have a say in my life. Amabel Thornton, will you marry me?" The box opened to reveal a ring of stunning simplicity, a single emerald surrounded by small diamonds. The green stone caught the light like captured starlight. "Yes," Amabel said, her voice strong and clear. "Yes, I will marry you." George slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he did something that made the watching crowd gasp audibly. He kissed her. Not a chaste brush of lips, a real kiss, deep and claiming and utterly inappropriate for public view. When they broke apart, Amabel was breathless and George was smiling. "Now they definitely know," he said. They returned to the ballroom hand in hand. The Dowager stood at the center of a cluster of shocked matrons, her expression murderous. But George walked straight to her, Amabel beside him. "Mother," he said calmly, "I would like to introduce you to my future Duchess. Miss Amabel Thornton has consented to be my wife." The silence was absolute. Even the musicians had stopped playing. The Dowager's voice, when it came, was cold enough to freeze. "This is unacceptable, and yet it is done. You are making a grave mistake. This girl has no breeding, no beauty, no accomplishments worthy of your position. She has intelligence, integrity, and courage." George's voice remained level but carried steel. "She has everything that matters. You will be a laughingstock." The Dowager looked around at the assembled crowd. "Already people are talking, saying you have lost your senses, saying she has used some manner of manipulation. Let them talk." George's hand tightened on Amabel's. "Their opinions do not govern my heart." "I will not allow this," the Dowager said. "I will not stand by while you throw away your position on a nobody. Then I suggest you find somewhere else to stand." George's tone turned icy. "Because Amabel will be my Duchess. She will live in this house. She will bear my name and my children. And you, Mother, will treat her with the respect she deserves, or you will no longer be welcome in my home." The threat landed like a thunderbolt. The Dowager actually stepped back, shock breaking through her controlled facade. "You would choose her over your own mother. I choose partnership over tyranny, love over appearance, truth over performance. If that means choosing her over you, then yes, without hesitation." Amabel felt tears prick her eyes. Not from sadness, but from the sheer power of being defended so completely. Movement near the entrance caught her attention. A man in military uniform had entered, scanning the crowd. When his eyes found Clara, his entire face transformed. Clara had seen him too. Her hand flew to her mouth, and for a moment she simply stared. "Captain Hendricks," Amabel whispered. Clara moved without thinking, crossing the ballroom toward the captain. He met her halfway, and they stood facing each other, oblivious to the scandalized whispers around them. "Miss Clara," the captain said, his voice carried to where Amabel stood, "I received your letter. I came as quickly as I could." "You came," Clara said wonderingly. "Did you think I would not? For you, I would cross oceans. I have crossed oceans." Then, with the same disregard for propriety that George had shown, the captain took Clara's hand and kissed it with lingering devotion. "The Thornton family is making quite the spectacle tonight," someone nearby muttered. "Good," George said loudly. "It is about time society had something real to witness, instead of the same tired performances." Amabel's father approached, his expression complicated. "Amabel," he said quietly, "might I speak with you?" She glanced at George, who nodded and stepped back slightly, giving them space but remaining close. "I owe you an apology," her father said. The words came slowly, painfully. "I treated you as though you were worthless. I blamed you for choices that were never yours to control, and I was wrong." Amabel said nothing, waiting. "I see now what I should have seen years ago. You are not the disappointing daughter. You are the brave one, the honest one." He looked at George, then back to Amabel. "I hope you can forgive me." In time. It was not enough. It could never be enough to erase 23 years of invisibility. But it was a beginning. "I will try," Amabel said. Her father nodded, then retreated into the crowd. The dowager made one final attempt. She clapped her hands, demanding attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "I apologize for this disruption. My son is clearly not himself tonight." "I assure you I am exactly myself," George interrupted, perhaps for the first time in years. He raised Amabel's hand, displaying the ring. "Miss Thornton has agreed to marry me. Those who wish to celebrate with us are welcome. Those who cannot accept my choice know where the door is." The room held its breath. Then, unexpectedly, someone began to clap, an elderly duchess whom Amabel did not recognize. Others joined slowly, uncertainly, until scattered applause filled the room. Not everyone clapped. The dowager certainly did not. But enough did that the message was clear. George Ashworth had chosen. And society, however reluctantly, would adapt. Music resumed. Conversations started again, though every eye remained on them. "Dance with me," George said. "People are still staring. Let them stare." He led her to the center of the floor. "I want the world to see me dancing with my future wife." They moved together as the music swelled. Amabel had never been a graceful dancer, but in George's arms she felt weightless. "Are you happy?" he asked quietly. "Terrified," she admitted. "But yes, happy. Good. Because this is only the beginning." She looked over his shoulder to see Clara dancing with Captain Hendricks, both of them smiling like the sun had risen just for them. "The beginning," Amabel agreed, "for all of us." And as they turned beneath the chandelier, Amabel realized something profound. She was no longer invisible. She was seen, chosen, and loved. And that was worth every battle still to come. The weeks following the gala passed in a strange blur of scandal and celebration. London society divided sharply. Half condemned George's choice as madness, proof that grief had addled his judgment. The other half found the story unexpectedly romantic, a refreshing departure from calculated matches. The Dowager Duchess retreated to the country estate, refusing to speak to her son. But Amabel barely noticed the gossip. She was too busy planning a life. George had insisted on a short engagement. 3 months, he said. Long enough to be respectable, but not so long that his mother could orchestrate interference. Amabel agreed, though for different reasons. She wanted to begin their real life together, wanted to stop existing in the uncertain space between promise and reality. Clara's courtship with Captain Hendricks moved even faster. The captain had resigned his commission and accepted a position managing an estate in Yorkshire. He had little fortune but strong prospects, and more importantly, he loved Clara with uncomplicated devotion. The two sisters spent long afternoons together, planning weddings and futures, and the lives they had never imagined possible. "Do you think we are being foolish?" Clara asked one afternoon. "Choosing love over security?" Amabel looked up from the letter she was writing to George. "We are choosing to be ourselves. If that is foolish, then I would rather be a fool than spend my life pretending." Clara smiled. "When did you become so wise?" "When someone finally gave me permission to exist." The Thornton finances had stabilized, though not through the marriage everyone expected. George had quietly settled the most pressing debts, framing it as a wedding gift rather than rescue. Captain Hendricks had negotiated a modest settlement that allowed the family to maintain their home, though on a smaller scale. Their father had grown quieter in recent weeks. He watched his daughters with an expression Amabel could not quite read. Regret, perhaps, or the dawning realization of what his priorities had cost him. One evening, he asked both daughters to join him in the study. "I have been thinking," he began, then stopped, started again. "I have been a poor father to you both. I treated Clara as merchandise and Amabel as invisible. I justified it as necessity, as duty, but the truth is simpler and uglier. I was a coward." Clara reached for Amabel's hand. "I cannot undo the years of harm," their father continued, "but I want you to know that I see you now. Both of you. I see your courage and your strength. I see what you have built despite me, not because of me." His voice cracked. "And I am prouder of you now than I have ever been." It was not absolution, but it was acknowledgement. And sometimes that was all forgiveness required to begin. "Thank you," Amabel said quietly, for saying it aloud. Her father nodded, unable to speak further. The wedding was set for early spring. George had wanted something grand, a public declaration of their commitment, but Amabel had argued for intimacy instead. "I do not need society's approval," she told him. "I need only yours." So they planned a ceremony at the small chapel on the Ashworth estate, close friends and family only, no spectacle, no performance, just truth. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright. Amabel stood in her room, wearing a gown of ivory silk that Clara had helped choose. It was elegant without being ostentatious, beautiful without being ornamental. It felt exactly right. Clara helped arrange her hair, weaving tiny white flowers through the dark strands. "You look like spring itself," Clara said softly, "like hope." A knock sounded. Their mother entered, her expression tentative. She had been subdued since the engagement, caught between disapproval of the method and relief at the outcome. Now she approached slowly, holding a small velvet box. "This was my mother's," she said. "I always thought I would give it to Clara, but I think you should have it." She opened the box to reveal a delicate pearl necklace. Simple, understated, perfect. Amabel felt tears threaten. "Thank you." Her mother fastened the necklace with gentle hands. "I have not been kind to you," she said quietly. "I told myself it was for your own good, that accepting your place would hurt less than striving for more. But I was wrong. You were never meant to be invisible, Amabel. I should have fought for you to be seen." It was the closest her mother had ever come to an apology. Amabel touched the pearls at her throat. "I am seen now." "Yes," her mother agreed. "You are." The chapel was small, but filled with warmth. Spring flowers decorated every surface. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, painting the walls in colors. George stood at the altar, looking more nervous than Amabel had ever seen him. When she appeared in the doorway, his expression transformed into something that could only be called reverence. She walked toward him without her father's escort. She had insisted on this. She was not property being transferred. She was a woman choosing her own path. When she reached him, George took her hands and held them as though they were precious. The ceremony was beautiful and brief. Traditional vows with one addition George had insisted upon. "I promise to see you," he said, his voice steady and sure. "Every day, in every way. To honor not just your position as my wife, but your mind, your spirit, your dreams. I promise never to let you become invisible again." Amabel's vows echoed his. "I promise to remind you that you are more than your title. That you are a man of vision and compassion who deserves to be known for who you are, not what you possess. I promise to be your partner, not your ornament." When they kissed, it was soft and sweet and full of promise. The small gathering erupted in applause. Clara cried openly. Even their father wiped his eyes. The wedding breakfast was held at Ashworth Manor. The Dowager Duchess had not attended the ceremony, but she appeared at the breakfast, her expression carefully neutral. She approached Amabel with measured steps. "My son has made his choice," she said formally. "I may not understand it, but I will respect it. You are the Duchess of Ashworth now. I trust you will fulfill your duties appropriately." It was not warm, it was barely civil, but it was acceptance of a sort. "I will do my best," Amabel replied. The Dowager inclined her head and moved away. George appeared at Amabel's side. "That was almost pleasant for her," he observed. "Almost," Amabel agreed. He pulled her into his arms, uncaring of propriety or watching guests. "Are you happy, Duchess?" Deliriously, she said. "Terrifyingly, completely. Good." He kissed her forehead. "Because this is your life now. Our life." Across the room, Clara and Captain Hendrik stood close together, planning their own wedding for next month. The captain said something that made Clara laugh, bright and free. "Look at us," Amabel said, "the invisible daughter and the beautiful ornament, both finally living." George followed her gaze. "You were never invisible. The world was simply blind." Time passed in a swirl of happiness. Amabel settled into her role as Duchess, not by suppressing herself, but by expanding it. She established a school for girls, funded scholarships, spoke openly about education reform. Society whispered, but George stood beside her through every controversy. Their life became a rhythm of shared mornings over books, passionate debates over dinner, quiet evenings by the fire. They traveled, they laughed, they built something neither had believed possible. One evening, a year after their wedding, Amabel stood in the library that had become her sanctuary. George found her there, reading by lamplight. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, settling beside her. "About the girl who used to hide in a different library, who thought she would spend her life unseen." She looked at him. "Sometimes I can barely remember what that felt like." "Do you miss it? The invisibility?" "Never." She touched his face. "You gave me permission to exist. That is worth everything." "You gave yourself permission," he corrected gently. "I simply had the wisdom to see what was already there." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had fought for the right to be themselves and won. In the distance they heard laughter. Clara and the captain were visiting, their first child due in months. The house felt full of life and possibility. Amabel rested her head on George's shoulder. "Thank you," she said, "for choosing me." "Thank you," he replied, "for being worth choosing." And in that moment, in that library full of books and light and love, Amabel understood a fundamental truth. She had not become visible by changing herself. She had become visible by refusing to change, by insisting on her right to exist as she was. And that, she thought, was the only kind of happy ending worth having. Amabel became visible not by changing herself, but by refusing to change. She found someone who saw her completely and loved what he saw. Perhaps that is what we all seek, to be ourselves, fully and unapologetically, with someone who sees us truly. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like to help others find it. Subscribe to join a community that believes love is about being seen, not perfected. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you listening? Your presence here matters. Thank you for sharing this journey.